Hi, and thanks once again for tuning into the Explaining History YouTube channel. Now, if you're watching this video, it's because you're doing something on Weimar Germany, the end of the First World War, and the rise of Nazism. Now, in the past few videos last week, I've kind of laid into a lot of the ludicrous myths about Hitler, Nazism, and tried to steer people away from the kind of the internet rumour mill. Was Hitler this, that, the other, a Satanist, a drug addict, what have you. And so now I wanted to try to give you something a bit more quality. Okay, so the stab in the back myth was propagated between 1918 and 1919 initially to help explain Germany's defeat in the First World War. The reason why Germany had been defeated in the First World War was twofold mainly. Germany had been blockaded by the Royal Navy and was at a point of starvation, and Germany had been defeated on the Western Front. The Ludendorff offensive of spring 1918 had failed to deliver a knockout blow to the British and French, and the British and French and Americans counterattacked in the last 100 days of the war, and the German defences capitulated. The German army had lost morale, was out of supplies, and surrender in September and October in hundreds of thousands. The war is effectively over. So the reason why the war is lost, first point, is that the German army loses the war. It really is strategically defeated on the Western Front. Now, the German army marched back into the Reich following the armistice in November 1918, their heads held high, presenting themselves as the defenders of the Reich. One of the strategic worldviews of the German government throughout the war, and the German media and many German people, was that Germany had been surrounded by enemies, by the British, by the French and by the Russians. A ring of steel had surrounded Germany, and Germany was fighting to defend itself. The fact that no enemy soldiers at that point had set foot on German soil proved to the German people that saw the Weimar, the Kaiser army marching back into Germany. It proved to them evidence that the Kaiser army had done its job and kept foreigners off German soil, and therefore had won the war, or at least had not been defeated. So when the delegation of the new Weimar politicians meets at the railway carriage in the forest in Compiègne to sign the armistice, there is a really good reason why they sign it. They know that if the British naval blockade doesn't stop, and if the war doesn't stop, then the revolution that swept the Kaiser from power will become not just a political revolution, but a social revolution. And that will mean the threat of communism. And the moderate Social Democrats are as frightened of the communists and what they will do as the aristocracy are. So there's a very good reason to very quickly arrange an armistice so that troops can be freed up to put down a communist uprising if necessary, and the social and economic pressures on Germany can lessen, even if it means that the Weimar government will be enormously unpopular. When people like Adolf Hitler, who is convalescing after a gas attack, hear of the armistice, they are horrified. Hitler himself says, he buried his head in his pillow and wept, and he said it was the only second time in his life that he'd wept. He really writes all this kind of overdramatic nonsense in Mein Kampf. The only second time in his whole life that he'd wept. The first was at his mother's grave, and the second was at the knowledge of the sacrifice of 2 million heroes for nothing. And one of the ways in which conspiracy theories work is that they help to make sense of the seemingly incomprehensible. At face value, it seemed to many Germans that it was incomprehensible why the German army had surrendered, and therefore treason, betrayal, must surely be the reason. And it became easy to kind of conflate this with anti-Semitism, this new social democratic government, well, that's a socialist government, and in the eyes of people like Hitler, that means it must be a communist government. It's certainly not. And who's behind communism? Well, in the eyes of Hitler and other anti-Semites, it's the Jews. The Jews are sort of the devious force behind it all, which again, they're most certainly not. There are both Jewish and non-Jewish communists and socialists, just as there are both Jewish and non-Jewish capitalists, and even in far-flung parts of Europe, there are Jewish and non-Jewish fascists. Though obviously you don't really find many Jewish fascists in Germany. So that's where this idea of the stab in the back legend comes from, and it's originally put about particularly by Ludendorff, but by others, to really get the army off the hook, so it's not too badly blamed for the defeat in the First World War. Okay, thanks very much. Remember to subscribe and give us a like and give us a comment, and I'll catch you on the next video.